Welcome everybody, this new episode of My Data Guest. You know already that this month is dedicated to prompt engineering and to all its evolutions. We already talked about context engineering, and today we are going to take on the whole vibe trend. One of the biggest extension of prompt engineering is actually all this vibe. I would say vibe coding, but actually there is also vibe video editing, vibe reporting. There is a lot of vibe things going around. So today's episode is dedicated, as I said, to the whole vibe trend. While shaping the My Data Guest agenda for March, I was wondering whether anybody's a vibe professional and a successful vibe professional. So I wanted to have some kind of a success story about vibing. So not only teaching how to use vibing, but really how vibe coding or vibe something can be useful for you and your business. So I came across a few very enthusiastic posts on LinkedIn by Philipp Kowalski describing how his way of implementing application and analyzing data has changed from after adopting vibe coding. And then I thought, that's exactly the kind of story that our audience would like to hear. So here he is. I invited Philipp Kowalski in person himself to talk about his vibing experience. Hi, Philipp.
Hi, Rosaria. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
We know each other from a very long time, so it was not a surprise that I found his post on. I'm following him, and he's always full of interesting new experiments and new idea. But this one was actually what I was looking for. So, okay. So, shall we start?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, Philipp, let's talk about your background. You have been working with data. So how long have you been working with data? What's your current job, and what kind of data problems do you usually face? So this is, I want to show that you are not, the last kid in the block.
Until last December, I've been working in the finance space for nearly 25 years, starting in procurement, then evolving in some kind of digitization expert. Because usually in the enterprise that I'm working for, we never have the problem that we don't have enough data. We rather have the problem that we want to make meaning out of data. And a few years back, like 2018, I discovered NIME, and that was my first aha moment. So you see it already here on my t-shirt.
I saw that, yeah.
I discovered it for me, and it was basically the response to my request saying, hey, you know what, I'm in procurement, I'm a negotiator, why do I have to do all this reporting stuff? So I automated that away, and when I first saw how cool it was for me, that was the first moment where I thought, I might be into it. So I started to work more and more with data, looking at other applications as well. One thing very important here, I think, to mention is I come from a commercial background. So I'm not a developer. It was always on my wish list, kind of. Maybe I should learn Python or Java. The problem was I never found the time, or I was just too lazy. At some point in time, I remember that I thought, I'm totally fed up with searching. Is it now a curly bracket or a square bracket? Is it a comma or a semicolon? And basically in the first step, NIME was really the answer to that. And I evolved from being a finance practitioner who uses it to streamline its data to basically teaching it to other people and saying, hey, I have something for you. Look at this. This is really great if you want to deal with your data. And that's right now I'm working for Siemens for nearly 25 years. And now I'm in a service that is called Low Code Service Factory, where we basically offer these kind of things, AI, data transformation, automation, and all these kind of things to Siemens internal customers. That's what I'm doing right now.
So you were not born as a programmer?
No, not
as
at
a
all.
developer.
It was always something that was on the horizon to solve my problems, but probably I was always too lazy to tackle it really full ahead. But yeah, I guess that's also part of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, exactly. So then can you give a definition about vibe coding? What's vibe coding for you? Because, when you talk to people, they say, yeah, sure, but we don't like it or we like it, but then we mean different things. So what's vibe coding for you?
So for me, it is really something that removes obstacles, because just what I said, like searching, it's minor things like searching for that square bracket or curly bracket, what library was again helping me to structure my data, how do I write a function again in Python. all these kind of things. I would dare to say I don't need to learn any more, because now I can say, hey, AI, this is what I want to do. I have a rough understanding how we could get there. Make me a few proposals. Let's talk about how we can tackle this. Let's make a plan together. And I can do it all with my voice. And that's the big obstacle that's taking away from me, is this remembering all the syntax, all the individual stuff. And sometimes you have to deal with even more than one language. And for me, vibe coding is really this direct approach to, yeah, I would say to a machine developer, or to developing using the machine. That's kind of what it feels like for me. So it has flattened the learning curve massively.
Do you vibe code in English or in German?
It
It's a bit like, do
depends.
you dream in English or in German?
Yeah, that it depends really. I have quite a few conversations in English most of the time when I know I want an English result, but maybe we come later a little bit to one of the apps I have vibe coded there. I did it in German because there was a private purpose for me, for myself. So there I just did it in German. I once heard that basically the translation from German to English back and forth eats up some of the context window. So I thought, yeah, I make it a little bit easier for my vibe coding buddy to directly do it in English, maybe where it's necessary.
Okay, so do you have vibe coding buddies?
Kind of, yes. So I have basically set up a vibe coding council for myself, where I have several agents, one being a super optimistic one who's saying, what a fantastic idea, one being a devil's advocate, and the third one trying to balance the two. And whenever I have an app idea, well, I love pop culture, and of course I do love the Lord of the Rings. So I have phrased it in a way that I say, I let the council gather, just like Elrond's council in Lord of the Rings. And then I just present my idea of the app, and then I can basically see how they interact, and also getting a final verdict that says, that's a good idea, that's not such a good idea. So that's how I work with these vibe coding buddies, if you want to call them. I call them
Okay,
council, but that's just a
so
name.
it's a little mold book that you made for
Uh,
yourself,
you,
kind of.
kind of, yes. I'm
Do
I'm
they
not founding a religion, but
do they talk behind your back?
I don't know.
Possibly.
So they're not running autonomously only when I call them. But what is very interesting, and there is definitely a parallel to the whole Moldbook experience, is usually they record their conversations, and that is really funny to read, because it's the devil's advocate all the time trying to bring down the optimist, saying, "Oh, you and your overly optimistic fact, don't use any facts at all." And then the optimist usually responds with, "Yeah, but seeing everything negative is also not the right." So you can really see these conversations, and
Okay.
that's very funny to read, I must admit.
Nice. So maybe you can show us, maybe you can give me an excerpt and then we can attach it to this
So,
video.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Sounds great. Sounds great. So the next question is, but then why would you need vibe coding? You said that it makes your life easier, right?
Yeah.
So you need it to develop app, or so why do you need vibe coding that you cannot do with other tools?
Well, I just recently read about a very new term, and especially in this space, buzzwords are floating all around every day. So I heard now the term of vibe working, and that probably also was very close to vibe coding. And what it basically allows me to do is do certain things also much faster. For example, right now, I'm working in a project where I have a huge spreadsheet with more than 200,000 formulas, and I need to trim it down. And I could start doing this manually, and I have experience in working with spreadsheets. I've done this for all my life. So I definitely can do this. This will probably take me 5 days, right? I delete something, find there is an error, reverse engineer it, then I undo my deletion, see how I can replace this, and so on and so forth. The thing is, with my vibe coding buddies, or however you want to call this, with vibe coding, I basically gave it the spreadsheet and said, you know what? look at this, please, and create me a 3-level formula directory per sheet, then per domains, and then on the formula basis. And I want you to store this as knowledge in this environment. And I will always come to you and ask you a question. Can I delete this sheet? Can I delete this section? And you tell me yes or no. And the interesting part is I could have come up with this myself. But first of all, it would have never been so beautiful as it is right now. And the second thing is it would never have worked out in 40 minutes. It would have taken me
Yeah.
hours on. And that's where I see I become much more productive. And the interesting part for me is I was expecting in some of my projects where I used it to be much more hands-on developing. But I find out that I'm becoming much more of a strategic advisor to my customers because I simply have more time for that. And because the kind of hard work is done by the AI. The one thing where I would be a little bit careful, and there we probably come to a very common objection to vibe coding, is I still need to understand overall the business processes. I still need to understand um, the output. For example, if we look at this formula directory, when I look at all the sheets from the project, I need to understand, is it missing anything? Because probably while analyzing it, it ran out of context or something. And if I blindly trust it and it says, yeah, you can delete it, and then I break everything, it is not that you, at least not from a business perspective, that you can blindly trust all results, but it basically helps me avoid this, I would call it blank page syndrome, where I have something to start with. And then from there, I could evolve as a human in the loops. I could evolve from there and then continue to work with what I have, but then instead of starting completely from scratch on my own, which would take much longer.
So, but then the advantage is that you might list for vibe coding, it's speed mainly. The main advantage is how fast they can do whatever you could do. Not necessarily correctness, because you still need to verify at the end that
Yeah.
what they did is correct, but definitely speed.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing, I think that always has been the case. So sometimes this brought as a rejection and saying that's why we don't vibe code. And I challenge that because I think, is that really true? Have you really trusted blindly software and tools and processes and developments before? Or did you also in the past, when you didn't have AI, put in security measures to make sure that the results you probably buy from a third party, that they really match your expectations and do not only look good on a PowerPoint level? And I challenge that because a lot of people are saying, you know what, is it? You cannot trust it. That's why I'm not doing it. But then if you follow this idea, then you cannot basically, no matter if it's AI or something else, you cannot trust anything if that's your mindset.
Yeah. You know how many times I've seen code get into production and it was not properly tested and then it failed? You know, the classic, it compiles, it runs, and then suddenly it doesn't run the way they wanted, and then it's a problem, even without the vibe coding. So this is in general a problem that you have to test your stuff to make sure that whoever developed it, to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. Yeah, in general.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, you can probably get faster to the testing phase, but you will not get rid of the testing phase. You probably get faster there, but does it free you up from that task if you don't want to do it? Probably not.
Once I was asked if, development now is useless because there are the agents, they do everything. I don't know, I challenge that. I think that development is going to become more important. It's going to change. So it's not going to follow the same rules, and there is going to be a little helper that is going to tell you what and how to do and help you debug things. But I think it's going to become more important because it opens a whole new world for developing. So actually you will be faster, you can develop more, or you can delegate some of the development. So actually, I don't know, I challenge this view that development will lose importance on that. It will change.
And I think there's an additional, maybe more secondary benefit to that is what will probably change drastically from my point of view is the classical approach to learning. Because while you're using that, and if you're asking the right questions, you can now ask questions basically that fit your requirements. You don't have to follow a given structure in a learning curriculum anymore. You just can ask the AI and say, I don't understand this regular expression. Can you please explain it to me like I'm 5? And then it does that. But probably you don't like this, explain it to me like I'm 5. You probably want to say, you know what, I'm a visual learner. Can you please go out and find me a YouTube video that explains explicitly what we're doing here? And then it gives you exactly what you need. So I'm a strong believer that learning is definitely changing drastically, probably, but exactly like you said. For me, this whole coding experience also has the additional benefit that, at least if I'm interested in learning, I have now new opportunities to feed that, or to scratch that itch of, I want to learn how it works.
So another advantage, in my opinion, is also the knowledge. So the fact that, as you said, you're not a developer, you're not a programmer by profession, but the fact that you want to develop something and it helps you create something from A to B, and then it works. Of course, you have to test it. Of course, this whole thing doesn't go away. Basically, it helps you with the barrier of coding. It helps you going into development, even though you're not a developer. So I think another advantage is, when you don't have the knowledge, it can help you maybe build something easy, but still build it.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a wonderful metaphor for that, I think. I don't
Okay.
know if you remember, but last year I did my first Ironman triathlon. And when would have looked at this 10 years ago, I would have said that is something for pro athletes. That's not for me. But you get into it just like you get into it like vibe coding. You all of a sudden try to understand, what is that specific training for? What is that specific nutrition for? How important is rest? How do I deal with mental challenges? And at the end of the day, that's exactly the same what you also learn when you look at vibe coded stuff. You learn how important a product requirements document can be to have a good start from the beginning. That's something that you probably also don't forget. And next time you start a project, you start right away with something like this instead of just saying something. So I think this personal development and improving my own knowledge, that is something just like in that Ironman thing. It is not done from today to tomorrow. And that's also true for vibe coding, probably. But here it's you gain knowledge over time. And I must say, this statement of the AI is going to take your job, I find this simply, that's ridiculous. I mean, there are probably a few functions that will be replaced, but a lot of the people usually can adapt to that. And I think that knowledge
They
gathering and
should.
learning is a wonderful way to embrace this new technology.
So another thing that the professional programmers say, the purist programmers say, it's that, at the end, this vibe coding is going to generate more broken software. So it's not really true innovation, but it's going to help people who don't know how to program create broken software. So what do you say about that?
It's basically the same than what we said before. Was that different? Is that really different than before, just because more people get access to it? Still, that's the same as with testing from my point of view. You still have to have the knowledge. Does first of all, you probably do a visual check. You look at it and say, does it deliver the result that I expected it to deliver? Maybe that's the first quality gate. If it already fails there and there are some numbers in there that look totally strange, you probably dive deep into it. But the next thing is also you look at certain deeper levels and check it and test it. And on the other hand, I also have to say, is that purist statement true? Because looking at all the issues, I mean, why do we have vulnerabilities? Why do we have constant Windows updates? If everything is wonderful, if a professional developer does it, why do we need these updates after all? Because there are situations, for me at least, and again, I'm not a developer, but anyways, I don't think that the situation has changed so drastically as it is sometimes described. The overall groundwork, or let's say the overall principle, still stands for me. And probably we have to adapt how we test software, but I think the principles are still there. And I would be pretty sure that there are a few testers out there that say, oh, I'm so super happy that AI is now here because it makes my life so much easier. But you still, of course, have to test it, especially when you put stuff into production.
Maybe in the next episode, we will invite a purist of programmer that says that vibe coding is going to produce more broken software. So we will hear what he has to say about that. Okay, so we invited you here to hear the real experience from you. So the hands-on experience. So you said you have created your little community of agents.
Yeah.
That you have created a bunch of apps using vibe coding. Tell us some of the practical projects that you have been solving with vibe coding, or at least, the project you got a massive help.
Yeah, I have a very fun story. So,
Okay.
typical every triathlete, and I have to stick to that story because, endurance athletes always want to talk about this stuff. So sorry for anyone listening and being bored, but I promise I can make a connection here.
Though I have to say that comparing vibe coding to a triathlon is somehow doesn't make it look easy.
I just make it match, right? I'm not sure if that's really a match.
Okay.
But the thing is, so after that thing last year, a typical thing that also happens is that you fall into a hole, right? At the end, before running a marathon, an Ironman, you really train extremely long, and after that, you're super happy that you don't have to train that hard anymore, and you gain some weight. Unfortunately, I had the same problem up to a level that I said, I'm no longer so satisfied with what I see on the weight scale every morning. So I signed up for a diet program using fryer that I have because it uses a lot of vegetables, and it came with an app. And I thought to myself, oh, that's pretty cool because I like these apps. I want to using my smartphone in the kitchen and doing all that stuff. But with all due respect, that app is really crap. And I was thinking, okay, I like the concept overall, but the app is crap. What do? Do I simply cancel? And then it dawned on me and I just said, no, I simply do my own app. So I went to Claude Code and we had like 3 hours in total probably. And it created me a progressive web app that does all the same things. It gives me a shopping list. It gives me a recipe list. It does me a meal plan. It captures all the images I shoot with my photo from a recipe that I have. Of course, because of copyright reasons, I do this only for myself. Of course. So I can share the repo, but I cannot share the live app, of course. That was so interesting to me because I thought, okay, I know exactly what I like about the existing app, and these are the things I don't like. And then I said, you know what? It was really like, I see the recipe, but I would like to have a cook it now button because otherwise I have to go out, go back to the recipe list, mark it, then say cook it. And it says, yeah, I changed this. 2 minutes later, it was done. So that my wife was like, what is that app that you have there on the smartphone? I've not seen that before. And I said, I vibe coded it. Isn't that cool? And that was one very interesting thing that it did. I did some of the usual suspects probably. So I vibe code a lot of my slides. So I do quite a few presentations, trainings, sometimes speak on events and so on. And I usually vibe code my slides. And I have an approach I have stolen from the internet is I do, first of all, a written document with the storyline. So I usually give it my tone of voice and say, hey, this is how I speak. So don't make it sound artificial, make it sound like me. Then I let the AI create some drawings or ASCII art if you want. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but it gives me a visual impression how my slide will look like. And then at the end, I say, hey, you know what? Call the PowerPoint skill from Anthropic and just create me the slides. And then I copy them over. And I just to my corporate slide deck. And I just received feedback from a colleague who just asked me, how are you able to publish so many slides? And I said, well, it's a lot of experience and a lot of work. I work long now, and of course I don't. So I'm using the AI to do it, and now it's out, so no longer a secret probably. And a lot of small things, a lot of small helpers. For example, the project I mentioned with that huge spreadsheet, that little formula directory it created for me. You could argue, is that really coding? Because at the end you don't have an app. Well, with all due respect, I don't care. As long as it fulfills the benefit that I'm expecting from it being faster, having reliable answers on what I can delete or not, For me, it's fine, and I don't care if it necessarily needs to be an
Yeah, but
executable or a web app or anything.
I think yeah, some kind of vibe stuff. As I said, it's a vibe trending. It doesn't need to be only coding. For example, I'm a big fan of the vibe video editing. It saves you so much time. It's
True.
unbelievable.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example because I like YouTube and this kind of stuff as well. But as you know, a 5-minute video is 5 hours minimum of work. And that's just like you really have to find the little cuts, and then you have to do this and that. And sometimes you just ask yourself, is that really worth the time? Such a little piece of content takes so much work. And that's also where I think a lot of very interesting things are happening. Right?
Yeah, I mean, you just tell him the piece, look for that piece where they say this and that. It
Mhm.
finds it, it isolates it, export it in the format this and that. And so for me, it's a life-changing
Yeah.
experience to vibe video editing. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the interesting part is I find that now we're talking about the second level of purity, right? Because probably the first one is say we don't vibe code at all, but the next one probably says, it's only vibe coding if you're really developing an app. And I would also question that. And the interesting part is, and that's one of the LinkedIn posts you probably refer to internally, in Claude Code, for example, these days, you can build your own subsystems like this Agents Council, or I built a subsystem. I always wanted to write a novel. I had something that created me a character Bible, a story Bible, a quality check that makes sure that in the story I don't have any inconsistencies, that checks for sentence lengths, all these kind of things, all bundled together. Does it have a neat, shiny interface? But it still works, and it guides me just like an expert through the process a little bit, and that's also kind of vibe code. I have, by the way, a very funny other story to share, or an app I created, because my son is 15 and he's in puberty. And if your kids are in puberty, probably their favorite facial expression is being annoyed. Every generation has their own kind of words, their own kind of speech. And I have learned that my children are heavily annoyed by their 50-year-old father using their youth language. So what did I do? I vibe coded a small web app for me and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, 10 lessons to help you speak youth language with like flexing and cringe and sass and what all those words are. And my brother-in-law and everyone loved it. My son, not so much, but that was done like in 10 minutes and it looked really great.
Absolutely. Do you have other app you want to share, other experience, things that you have put together using the vibe trend?
There are a few things, but they're all comparable to what we already talked about. So there is a small app that I use to learn regular expressions because I simply find the topic so interesting and I've just styled it in a way that I like it, so it matches my requirements. Yeah, these kind of things.
Okay, so I have a question for you. This is something that, if everybody gets either excited or against the vibe coding, okay. But once you have vibe coded, there is one thing that I'm not sure how people approach. So I'm going to ask it to you. If you make a mistake, if there is an error, how do you debug the vibe coding? I mean, how can you ask to find the bug, or how can you talk the thing into making it correct unless you put your hands on the code? So, because obviously if there is a bug, you have asked something wrongly, or
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
So how do you approach the old debugging way when you
Well,
just
I
ask?
think one way, if it's an obvious bug and just the result is not there and it throws you an error, probably the overall idea is to give that error back to AI and say, hey, I'm getting that error. What does that mean? Help me explain it. Try to find the source for the error. I think the more difficult part is when it gives you a result and on the surface it looks good, but if you just, for example, read through it, it is not really what you expected. Something goes wrong. And then basically, this is a combination for me, at least, of learning and conversation. I know that every AI model has a cutoff timestamp, right? That's when that they have that much information. I don't know, 30 billion or whatever models, but there's a point in time when they stopped learning and the model was deployed. And everything that came after that, the AI cannot know. Very typical use case in our prior space, it does not know of the newer NIME nodes. It always tries to come up with a scripting node, and I have to explicitly tell it, this is the error I get, and please do not provide me a solution with the scripting node. Please provide me a solution with native NIME nodes or whatever the problem is. And that's a little bit the thing that you cannot have right away. You only have to discover it basically through your own pain, seeing why does it always do it like this? Yes, because its knowledge is limited, even though it looks like it knows everything and behaves like it knows everything. But if you accept what it is, a prediction machine at the end of the day, that tries to tell you what you want to hear, then with that knowledge and discovering some of these patterns in different tech stacks, for example, it helps to get closer. But it is for sure not a one-shot approach, meaning it's always iterating through it. So give it that error message. It says, now I find the error. Yeah, you found the error for sure. You try it out. It still throws you an error. Next time, it probably doesn't throw you an error, and you discuss back and forth. I had a case where it evaluates some of my ideas and it tries to improve my ideas, but it was never satisfied until I found out that the problem was probably in the prompt, because merged the prompt from different sources and I gave it a contradicting prompt. So at the top I said do A, and at the bottom I said no matter what, always do B. And then I was surprised to never see A. Well, of course, at the end I'm telling it never do. And I found this out both for prompts, but also for code that has been developed for me by the AI by simply iterating through it. So I fear a bit there is, at least I don't know of it, not a solution where you just can say, hey, this is my vibe code, find all the errors.
I see. So basically you talk to the AI to debug the code that they have generated, which makes sense. But then can you, sorry.
Yeah, and also good old Google search probably to a certain extent, right? And or take a stupid easy thing like regular expressions. Just trying out some things in regex101.com and see, is that really the solution? It looks somehow strange. Does it really extract the part that I want to see? And I know it's not there for every language, and that's probably specific to regular expressions. But anyways, it's a combination of things. But again, like we said before, I would state it again and say, is that really different than what it was before? You probably used Stack Overflow and Google in the past and forum posts, and you also had to go through some iterations.
So, but then can you also delegate the testing to the AI? I mean, your negative agent, he could be a great tester. He would complain all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you set it up this way, I think that counsel or positive and negative is a pretty good example, because the negative agent probably says some things I don't want to hear necessarily. But if you that's a little bit also in the responsibility of the developers to take a step back and say, okay, how can I make sure this is a little bit more bulletproof? And probably one thing I love to do if I'm in a really bad mood is asking any AI to roast me on a certain topic, like really make it really hard, roast me really hard. And it always makes me laugh because it's so funny. But basically, it's the same approach. Try to give the AI, if you want to use it, give it certain perspectives and also enrich it with things you probably know about your process. I have a lot of conversations where I say, no, I'm sorry, but and I'm really saying I'm sorry to the AI, which is kind of stupid, by the way. But it's just like you look at it and say, no, this can't be right. It's impossible. So it's a combination of its feedback, your own knowledge, some old school techniques like a Google search or forum search, or an interaction also with someone else. And sometimes it's just as easy as saying, okay, looks like I'm in a negative rabbit hole. Probably I should just sleep over it, and maybe tomorrow it works better and I have a new perspective on it. It works. But I get a little bit metaphysic here. That's just how life is, right? I mean, doesn't necessarily be different when you're doing coding with an AI.
Definitely. So the last questions to conclude, I have two more questions. So We talked before, and I said that, in my opinion, the programming jobs are not going to disappear. They're going to change, but they are not going to disappear. Expanding from that, extending to other professions. So, what skills become more important in a vibe coding world? So, the correctness of the syntax is now taken care of. So, what skills now become more important in a job, but also that you should list in a CV in a vibe coding world?
I think with the fast changing pace that we have in this whole AI space, I think you definitely in a CV need to show that you're always willing to learn. Even for a 50 plus guy like me, I discover something new nearly every day. So you need to be curious and learning, and depends on your personality how you put that in your CV. The next thing, you should have a good ability to abstract your ideas. Also combined with something you might have covered before is classical prompting techniques. Like in nearly every prompt that I use, I say, don't assume, ask me questions if you are unclear about things. And that, even though some things are obvious and some questions sound like it asks me because it knows I want to be asked, not necessarily because it really misses some knowledge, but it helps me again to also reflect on my input. So I think it's a combination of reflection. I think one thing that is always important with data in general is the ability to spot patterns. And we have discussed this when we were talking about NIME, right? It's not so much anymore knowing formulas like in Excel. It's more, where is the pattern that the machine can handle for me? And that's also very helpful here. So the best case to put this in some kind of CVs is probably by using a kind of example. So I know that we at Siemens, for example, usually ask people, and we just recently hired a new working student and got a use case, and she worked on it. And then we asked her, did you use AI? And she said yes. And I said, well, cool. That's exactly what we are expecting. So how did you use it? What did you ask it? What did you do? And that's a little bit where you probably can also show off these kind of skills.
Yeah, I think the abstraction, it's already a big skill to have, but I think it's going to gain even more importance. Absolutely. But so about that, you actually also do some brainstorming with your agents there.
Yes, from time to time. So I have, let's say, a project or a Cloud Code project that I call Live OS. So for my live operating system, so to say.
Okay.
And there I get a daily brief every morning. And it gives me, like, every week, it gives me a recap of what we have done so far. And the good thing
Nice.
here is it stores all the things that we discuss in a format that it can easily work with, mainly Markdown files. And what I also sometimes do then is just look at the bunch of files that have been collected over time and say, I'm a little bit bored. Look at the ideas we have. What can I do? I'm more in the creative space. So maybe it's a little bit more about creating something, or maybe it's just fine-tuning something. Look at my wish list. What's next on my wish list? I have seen one model that I really, really like. It's called the BMAD method. And that's basically a model that takes you through a classical software development process, from brainstorming, market evaluation, writing a product requirements document, coming up with user stories, having a scrum master that steers the whole thing, all within one AI model. And there is also a huge element, is especially at the beginning, brainstorming, because you start with, I have an idea for that product, and then it runs you through several brainstorming models and discusses from, like, the five hats model, or asking 5 times why, or whatever model you choose. And it comes up with very interesting results that out of the box I probably would not have thought of.
Okay, so last question. Is vibe coding then a temporary phase, or is it the future of development?
Oh, that's a little bit of mean question with such a generic term like vibe coding.
You can put all
I would
the exception that you want.
Yeah, I would phrase it like it will be, I think, in whatever way, it will be a very important part of development. About that, I'm pretty much sure, because the benefits are, from my point of view, so obvious. It's speed, it's low entry barriers for people like me who are not developers. So it will definitely change the way we work in development. Now I see myself, because I say we developers, so probably some purists would argue that, but I think it's there to stay. At least it feels like. I guess what surprises a lot of people is just the speed. It took like Scrum and all these things 10 or 15 years to really come into the software development and maybe get rid of a lot of the waterfall models until a lot of people accepted it. And the speed of AI and vibe coding, as we said, it's just sometimes something new comes around every week.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have reached the end of this podcast. I would like to thank you, Philipp, for the great stories. I really love your interviews. And I would like to thank the audience for listening to us until the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and bye.